Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to this second meeting of the municipal year for the Planning Applications Committee. Just before we make a start, I'm just going to go through the evacuation procedure and then a little bit of housekeeping, and then we'll make a start. So in terms of evacuation procedure, a fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits, which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to the member of staff. Please also make sure that all your mobile phones are turned off and set to silent. Just to let everybody know, this meeting is being recorded for future broadcast as well. Do I have any apologies? I think we've got everybody here now, which is great. We've got one substitution, I believe, as well, so that's Councillor Walsh for Councillor Evans. Moving on to the minutes then, is anybody happy to propose the minutes as being an accurate record? Thank you, Councillor Smith. Do I have a second of that? Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Okay, all those in favour of those being accurate? Okay, I think that's unanimous. So I'll sign those off. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Kandaka.
Thank you very much, Chair. Two items to mention. On item 1, the addendum makes it clear I did put an objection in as a county councillor about the highways issues. So I would like to speak against it being deferred, and then I'll leave the room. So if you could let me speak against deferral, but then I'll leave the room. And on item 2, I actually commented that it should go to committee. So I explained why I had concerns, but I didn't consider that to be an objection. So I will stay in the room for item 2, but I did actually comment to explain why it should go to committee. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you, Councillor Kandaka. Any other declarations? Councillor Shepherd, followed by Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. The removal of champion for safeguarding children and adults on the declarations of interest, please.
Thank you, Councillor Markham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Member of the Warwickshire County Council and also Bedworth Neighbourhood Watch.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some appointments by office that aren't listed. A5 Member Partnership, Patrol Joint Committee and the Building Control Partnership Steering Group. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Pandahar.
Sorry, I had a contact by Councillor Singh about item number 3, but I did not indicate how I'm going to vote.
Councillor Hammersley.
And just a member of the Warwickshire County Council.
Okay, I can't see any other hands up in terms of any other declarations. So moving on then, that takes us then, I believe, to item number 1 on tonight's agenda. So I'll hand over to our case officer, Jackie.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not reading the whole committee report, the agenda report. You just want me to explain the reasons why, don't you? Okay. The applicant has requested deferment on this. The applicant has requested that members defer this application in order for them to try to overcome the reasons for refusal in the event the application goes to appeal. In the event the application goes to appeal, the inspector would take into consideration whether the council have worked with the applicant to resolve any issues. However, the application has been ongoing since 2020 and the objections have been forwarded to the applicant but not satisfactorily addressed. As stated previously, other Section 73 applications on the site are still outstanding in terms of amending the trigger of numbers of occupation for access and highways objections on safety grounds. These are for other conditions that have not been, highway safety conditions have not been overcome. Despite this, the developers continue to allow occupation of the houses in breach of these conditions. So it's considered pertinent that deferment is time limited, possibly to the 12th of July or the 7th of September committee, to ensure this does not happen with this current condition and application. The case officer has now left the authority, but when contacted, he does not consider that the fundamental concerns could be overcome. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So the first thing we've got to deal with on this item is the deferral which has been asked for. So do I have anyone who's willing to propose the deferral go ahead? I'm not seeing any hands up. Okay, so in that case then we can move straight to the item, I believe. Is that right, Wahida? Because we've got no proposer. Yeah, okay, so that means then, do I have somebody to move the proposal? Sorry, my apologies. Presentations first then. Sorry. We'll get it there. We'll get there.
It's just an unusual case, that's all. Thank you, Chair. Right. This is a Section 73 application for the removal of Condition 28 relating to limiting the occupation to 250 dwellings prior to the opening of the Spine Road at Site 31A002 at the rear of Milby Drive and Higham Lane. The condition was on consent granted by the Council, reference 34076 in 2018. Condition 28 states, no more than 250 dwellings can be occupied until completion and opening of the Northern Link Road is provided between Higham Lane, A5 and or the A47, the long shoot. The original condition was agreed with Persimmon prior to the determination of the application, and they amended the red line to specifically include this link. Without the condition, it is likely that the original proposal would have been refused, as its inclusion clearly underpins the scheme. The site is currently being built out by Persimmon. The applicant has confirmed that by the end of June 2021, 59 homes will be occupied. The Spine Road the application refers to is part of the proposed new Northern Relief Distributor Road, intended to connect all the individual development sites within the Strategic Housing Allocation HSG1. Excuse me. The Spine Distributor Road will ultimately provide a link from the long shoot through to Weddington Road, thus connecting all the sites via car, pedestrian and cycle links to the new infrastructure within these individual schemes, comprising of schools, local and district centres, GP surgeries, leisure facilities and parks, and providing alternative transport links to relieve the existing roads in the area. The site is approximately 2.5 kilometres north of Nuneaton town centre and partly abuts the St Nicholas Park estate. The plan on the left on the slide shows the red line outline of the Persimmon site. Higham Lane is to the left, Milby Drive is to the south, and beyond is Norwich Close. To the north, I'll just show it there on screen, is the Red Rose site, which is not part of the HSG1 allocation. Beyond this is the A5. The plan to the right is just an enlargement of the one on the left. And it just shows more clearly, hopefully, the link across Nuneaton Fields Farm that was actually shown within the red line on the original planning application. As I've said, the site is part of the Strategic Housing Allocation HSG1 and has approval for 453 dwellings. The plan on screen shows the HSG1 allocation as a whole. The Persimmon site is in the middle of this. It's this site there. The grey dotted line is the indication of the link road. The blue dots are the proposed new schools in the other HSG1 allocations. The current main access for the Persimmon site is off Higham Lane, south of White House Farm. There is to be a secondary access also off Higham Lane. That's the main access there, and the emergency access is there. You can, on the plan, see the main road links through the Persimmon site. This is the Spine Road here, travelling along there. And that's where it goes through Nuneaton Fields Farm. The link for the approved Persimmon scheme is across Nuneaton Fields Farm, not in Persimmon's ownership, and is to provide a spine road for vehicles, pedestrians and cycling link to Calendar Farm, which has outline approval for 850 dwellings, which will include a local centre, community hub and primary school. This adjacent site has part approval for reserve matters. Although not completely accurate to scale, I've tried on the slide before you to stitch the Persimmon site, the red line is around, would be around there, with the Calendar Farm Reserve Matters application. It's just basically to indicate where from Persimmon the new local centre, which is there, and the new school will be. Calendar Farm is also to have a link to the A5, and sub-base has already been put down to the link road adjacent to Nuneaton Fields Farm up to the boundary with Nuneaton Fields Farm. The Gelson site is for 150 dwellings, which is also under the Strategic Housing Allocation HSG1. There will also be links through to Bowways Phase 2, also off the long shoot and also part of the Strategic Allocation. As well as the original approval for the site for 453 dwellings, approval has been given for a temporary access under 036451. There are also 3 non-determined applications on the site, 2 of which are for similar Section 73 applications to vary conditions in relation to timing for the completion of the main vehicular access prior to the occupation of the first house, and for the temporary access to seize on occupation of the first house or the opening of the main entrance, whichever is soonest. There's also an application for a temporary access. These 3 applications are currently not determined as they have outstanding objections from Warwickshire County Highways due to highway safety issues. That is what I referred to in my initial discussion on the site. Despite non-determination, further dwellings have been occupied on the site. These other proposals are not determined as they would be of refusal due to highway safety, and any inevitable enforcement action would be against the developer but also the new owners of the houses moving in, and enforcement action could potentially mean that people become homeless. This application is being reported to Planning Committee at the request of Councillors Keith Condacore and Councillor Robert Tromans. Councillors Condacore's comments are on the addendum. There have been 2 neighbour objections to the proposal, as proceed within the agenda on page 18. There have been objections from Warwickshire County Council Highways, the Council's policy team, Stagecoach and Warwickshire Fire and Rescue to this current application before you. The application has been considered against the Borough Plan HSG1 for the Strategic Housing Allocation, including the infrastructure required for this. Policy HS2 for the Strategic Accessibility and Sustainable Transport, as well as the National Planning Policy Framework. The considerations are to highway infrastructure in the area and sustainability. Submitted with the proposal was a transport assessment and which largely dealt with the safety of the removal of the link. Criteria 14 of the Borough Plan HSG1 states that provision of a strategic access road, spine road, through the site with integrated footway and cycle provision provided in order to secure a sustainable pattern of development across the strategic site. Policy HSG1 states, the policy seeks to ensure that the development of future parcels of land, the subject of individual applications, will be brought forward in an integrated manner in order to deliver wider community and infrastructure benefits for existing and future residents in the northern Nuneaton area. Furthermore, at paragraph 7.31 in the Borough Plan specifically refers to the Spine Distributor Road. It states a new distributor link road through the allocation will be provided to include primary access on Weddington Road, the Longshoot and Higham Lane. This should be delivered in line with the indicative route shown on the concept plans. This then states the strategic transport assessment assumed that this link will be fully operational by 2027. This strategic transport assessment states the link has to be in place by 2027 because paragraph 7.31 refers to the fact that the distributor road will need to provide a bus link to ensure that all households within individual developments are within 400 metres of a bus stop, and a highway link connects all the separate developments to each other and also the adjoining local highway network. The transport modelling carried out for the Borough Plan evidence base considered the necessity of the link road and did not make any provision for its delay or lack of provision. All of the modelling carried out for the Borough Plan evidence base and policies within the Borough Plan have been assessed by the Planning Inspectorate and considered acceptable and were tested at the inquiry for the Borough Plan. No new transport assessments have been provided by the applicant to support the acceptability of removal of this link. Consequently, by delaying or non-provision of this link with Calendar Farm and the services that this adjacent site will provide of schools and local centre, the loss of the link road will make the Persimmon site unsustainable and will not encourage residents to make non-car journeys by cycling or walking to the services that will be provided within Calendar Farm. By omitting the link, the new key bus route 3HSG1 would also be prevented. The width of the Persimmon site is relatively narrow onto Higham Lane, but the site is deep away from the road. The submitted transport assessment in support, let me just go back there, in support of the proposal recognises that some residents to the rear of the development, so these, would have a further 800 metres walking distance in order to reach existing schools and local services, but makes no reference to the connectivity to the proposed services in Calendar Farm. Once built, these would be relatively close using the link road, but would necessitate a much longer trip if the link was not provided. Similarly, the proposed bus route has not been considered within the submitted documents. Warwickshire County Council Highways objected and concluded that without the link there would be highways issues due to the increase in car movements and the need for reliance on private car-based trips to the detrimental impact on the effective and efficient operation of the existing highway network. Stagecoach has similar objections to highways, and the comments are proceed on page 19 of your agenda. These state the link is a critical part of the HSG1. The site will lose its permeability within the wider context of HSG1 for all forms of transport. No provision has been made on the approved plans for buses other than with the use of the link road, which is intentionally a suitable width to provide a bus link. The applicant tried to use the lack of a link road within the adjacent Red Rose site, but this is spurious as were not included within the HSG1 allocation, so did not require to meet the policies within this. They continue to say would not meet the 300 metres provision for distance to a bus stop. The Section 106 legal agreement included a contribution for bus services, and the bus services could not be met without that link. The Planning Inspectorate considered the policies for HSG1 was sound, and the application is for the removal of Link Road completely and not just to extend the number of houses that can be provided without it. The Council's policy team equally refers to the fact that the application fails to meet the criteria within the HSG1 policy, including the specific reference of the link within criteria 14. Warwickshire County Council Fire and Rescue also objected, stating Link Road needs to be completed prior to occupation on the same grounds that it may never get completed otherwise. Number of properties off one access is excessive, and finally already concerns with access to a number of the individual properties on the site which have not been resolved. In response to the objections, the applicant submitted justification for the removal of the condition. Paragraph 4 of this refers to the fact that the link road was provided on third-party land, which is Nuneaton Fields Farm, and that by restricting the provision to 250 dwellings, the applicant considers, in relation to Nuneaton Fields Farm, that the landowner's hand of Nuneaton Fields Farm is strengthened by condition 28, making it less likely that the connecting link will be provided. Should the landowner's ransom position be diminished or removed, they are more likely to sell the land. No information has been received to evidence the discussions between the two parties. The Council's case officer report for the original Persimmon application indicated at the time of the original application that the agent was of the opposite opinion. As the officer report states, the current landowner of the application site is willing to purchase the Nuneaton Fields Farm in order to provide the link. However, they state that this can only be achieved once consent for the scheme is granted and after some of the housing on the site have been developed out. The applicant's response in paragraph 12 of this referred to the fact that part of the relief road to the west of Higham Lane belonging to Warwickshire County Council at Top Farm, and which has they've stated has not come forwards for development. However, the outline application at Top Farm was submitted in 2016 and is due to come to committee in the near future. Notwithstanding this, this is irrelevant as the objections are in relation to the sustainability of the Persimmon site as well as the wider area. This response to the objections also states that modelling for the emission of the link was provided in 2016 and the transport of adjacent sites cannot be used as justification for the provision of the link by Persimmon. However, Highways have requested this is reassessed with the current development in the area. The rebuttal refers to the fact that the site was considered at the time of the original decision as sustainable and before Calendar Farm was approved, and therefore it was considered sustainable on its own merits at the time the application was approved. However, this was not the case, as the officer report at the time of the original application for the Persimmon site stated, whilst the site does not provide any amenity buildings, there are existing shops and schools within the St Nicholas estate, and amenity buildings, a new local centre, doctor's surgery and schools are proposed on the two adjacent planning application sites at Calendar Farm, outline recently approved subject to the signing of a 106 legal agreement at the time, and Top Farm, which wasn't determined at that time and also still isn't. The adjacent site of Calendar Farm, Council Reference 034615, was resolved at Planning Committee for approval in 2018, but the legal agreement was not completed until August 2019 and the decision notice was issued on the 29th of August 2019. The original Persimmon site was approved on the 10th of August 2018. Therefore, consideration of sustainability on the original development relied on the link road in order to ensure sustainability. Policy HS2 of the Borough Plan refers to the fact that transport implications for development should be considered to ensure adequate accessibility to all modes of transport, that the development identifies suitable demand management measures, that the connectivity of the development to strategic facilities is considered, also how the development delivers sustainable transport options to the wider transport network, whether the proposal will meet acceptable levels of impact on existing highway networks and the mitigation measures required to meet this acceptable level. Finally, to ensure a 15% modal shift to non-car based use sustainable transport options. By the lack of provision of the link, it is considered that the proposal fails to meet with the Borough Plan HS2 as well as the criteria within HSG1. Paragraph 102 of the NPPF refers to the need to consider transport issues at the earliest stages, the potential impacts of development, including the environmental impacts, and for the need to promote sustainable transport. Paragraph 108 of the NPPF is along the same lines as paragraph 102, but includes the need for safe and suitable access for all users and for the need for mitigation measures for development. Similarly, paragraph 110 states the need for prioritising sustainable transport both within the scheme and to neighbouring areas to address the need for all people and allow the efficient delivery of goods and emergency services. Likewise, paragraph 127 of the NPPF seeks for the development to function well and add the quality of the area for the lifetime of the development to optimise sustainable transport and services and to create accessible neighbourhoods as well as promote health and well-being. In conclusion, it's recommended that the committee refuse the application as the proposal is contrary to these policies, as it is considered that insufficient evidence has been provided to justify the removal of condition 28 or evidence to support justification that land ownership is an issue. By the non-provision, the delivery of the link road would make the development unsustainable and would not encourage residents to make sustainable transport choices or provide connectivity to key services and facilities. The removal of the link would jeopardise a new viable public transport service coming forwards to serve the whole development. In addition, the removal of condition 28 would lead to a significant reliance on private car-based trips, to the detrimental impact upon the effective and efficient operation of the highway network. The proposal is contrary to local policy of HS2 to bring forward future parcels in an integrated manner and to deliver wider community and infrastructure benefits for existing and future residents. Without this proposal, this proposed distributor road through the allocation, the primary access points on Weddington Road, the Longshoot and Higham Lane cannot be fully utilised and would therefore be contrary to criteria 14 of HSG1, as it would fail to secure a sustainable pattern of development across the strategic site. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jackie, for going through all of that. So we now have a recommendation to refuse. Do I have anyone who's happy to propose Councillor Wilson? Do I have a seconder, Councillor Smith? So we can now move to the debate. So Councillor Kondaka.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I need to obviously leave the room after I've spoken. I objected to the county councillor. This totally wrecks the connectivity. We've got a massive HSG1 site, schools at either end for primary schools, and a secondary school near the middle, possibly, if the top farm gets approved. And this takes away the whole middle chunk. The only thing that Persimmon were providing was the link. Other developers were providing land for schools, land for GPs, all the things development needs. And Persimmon is like that stone in the top of an arch. It joins it all together. It's half a mile wide, and you can't just take it out without actually wrecking the whole area. And very importantly, the only walking and cycling routes to connect the left-hand side and the right-hand side is along the A5, which only has a narrow pavement on the north side. You can't possibly expect people to go along the A5 back half a mile into the development. It is absolutely disastrous to chop HSG1 into two halves. Persimmon are the worst developer I've ever encountered, and they knew they had this problem 3 years ago when they applied for planning permission. So we should give them no mercy. This has been a disaster that's waiting to happen because they're unwilling or unable, who knows what, to buy that 100 metres of land to cross, or might be 50 metres of land, just to cross the top of the Nuneaton Fields farm. So I really ask the committee to reject this. It totally wrecks schools, hospital, everything, because you're just thrown up onto the A5 and it's a massive half-mile long cul-de-sac. So I agree with all the objectors, stagecoach, fire. It is just madness, and I will leave the meeting now. If someone could call me when it's been determined.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kondaka. Would anybody else like to speak on this matter? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I think that the officer recommendation is spot on with this particular application. It's not as if the need for a northern relief road on the HSG1 site has not been known about for a significant period of time. Indeed, many moons ago, under the first consultation phase of the then borough plan, I think probably close to 8 and maybe 9 years ago now, there was talk of a northern and eastern relief road. Thankfully, the eastern relief road has gone because that was through my patch, and would have just shifted the issue through an existing development. This, however, deals with an issue within the new development that is being created through HSG1. Now, we can argue the merits or otherwise of HSG1 in itself. I happen to think it is a monstrous overdevelopment in the St Nicholas and Weddington area, but as it stands at the moment, it is a legally binding policy that the council has to have note of. Whilst we still have this policy, though, in order to make things work, this northern relief road is essential. Persimmon or the landowner or whoever it was who initially thought about putting this site forward will not have had their eyes closed on this. They will have known that this particular relief road is necessary to make the whole scheme work. They have a right to develop because that has been granted by the council. But with rights, Chair, come with responsibilities, and that obligation to deliver that link road is the responsibility which we as an authority, and in particular this planning committee, needs to actually make a stand on and say, no, this is what you promised all those years ago. You went into it with your eyes open. It's not as if officers will not have told them that these are necessary, and we are now going to hold you to account, because this HSG1 is close to 5,000 houses now by the time it's all developed, and if we leave it as it is with this application, then Councillor Condacor is right, the keystone will fall and then the rest of it will not work. So we need to send a message loud and clear to Persimmon: get your act together, deliver this road, and if you have to pay more money than you would like for it, that's business. You knew about it when you went into this undertaking, so get on with it. So I'll be supporting the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Does anyone else like to speak on this matter? I would also like to speak on this matter if there's no other speakers, and I have to echo both what Councillor Wilson and Councillor Kondaka have said. I find it the whole thing preposterous that developers think that they can sort of get out of things that have been agreed. They knew exactly what they were getting into with this, and that we needed this relief road to be built, because, as you say, it is very much the keystone of what's going on. I also find it unbelievable they would expect us to have enforcement action potentially against members of the general public, and we're looking at possibly enforcement action against several hundred members of the public, where we may end up having to evict them, which I just can't conceive that position happening. All the services have spoken against Persimmon, and I think we've got a borough plan. The borough plan works both ways. It gives protection for developers, but it also gives protection for us as residents of this borough. And I think we've got to hold you to Persimmon to account. So again, I will be sort of voting to refuse this planning application. Are there any other speakers at all? No. So we go to the vote then, please. Yeah. So in that case, can we have a show of hands? All those against the application, please. Okay, I think that's unanimous. Yeah, that's in favour of the recommendation, yeah. Okay, can we move on to agenda item number 2 then, please, Jackie? Yeah, thank you very much. If you could resume on to item 2, please.
Thank you, Chair. The application is to amend conditions on the original outline application reference 033926, which was for the residential development of up to 360 dwellings with vehicular access off Heart of England Way, including open space, footpaths, landscaping and other infrastructure. This was an outline to include access. This was approved in 2018. This previous outline has received an approval for a Section 73 application, which is a variation of condition, under reference 035918, which was to amend condition 11 and 13 of the outline. This previous Section 73 was for the amendment to Condition 11 to amend the trigger for the delivery of the signalisation scheme at the A4254 Eastborough Way, Heart of England Way, Townsend Drive, prior to the occupation of the 100th dwelling, and variation of Condition 13 to amend the delivery of the signalised Toucan crossing to provide to the occupation of the dwelling. This previous Section 73 application was approved in April 2019. A Section 73 application approval becomes the new main approval for development, which is why the new proposed amendments are to this rather than to the original outline. This current application is for the variation of Condition 10 to amend when the detailed drawings of the highway mitigation schemes are required to be submitted to prior to occupation of the development. Variation of Condition 24 to amend when the details of the provision of water supplies and fire hydrants are required to be submitted to prior to occupation of the development, and variation of Condition 26 to amend when the details of the sustainable welcome packs are required to be submitted prior to occupation of the development. Condition 10 was that detailed drawings of the highway mitigation schemes had to be submitted and approved prior to groundworks, remediation or built construction of any phase. Condition 24 and 26 where that information had to be submitted and approved before development in that phase commences. The site is around 14 hectares. To the north is the crematorium, to the south is the residential estate of Crowhill Park, and Eastborough Way is to the west. Currently, also for consideration for this site is the reserved matters, looking at the details for the development for the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale under reference 037631. This Section 73 application has been reported to committee at the request of Councillor Kondaka, who has made comments, and there have been 2 neighbour objections from 2 addresses. The details are precede on pages 28 and 29 of your agenda. The issues to consider are highway safety, access to sustainable transport and fire safety. In terms of highway safety, Condition 10 of the previous permission states that detailed drawings for the highway mitigation schemes are required to be approved prior to groundworks. The mitigation schemes are those at the A4254 Eastborough Way, Heart of England Way, Townsend Drive, the A4254 Eastborough Way, Crowhill Road Junction, the A4254 Eastborough Way, Avenue Road, B4114 Lutterworth Road, Highfield Road Roundabout Junction, and the A4254 Eastborough Way, Toucan Crossing. Drawings were submitted to ensure the principles of these could be carried out, but Condition 10 was for the detailed drawings. The present application is to state this is to be provided via to occupation. The information provided with the application states that this extended time frame is due to the protracted time that it takes technical approval through Warwickshire County Council Highways under the standard Section 278 process. A Section 278 is part of the Highways Act to allow developers via a legal agreement with the Highways Authority to make alterations to a public highway. The applicant states the detailed drawings are progressing for the development and indeed details are being prepared to submit for approval of Condition 10. However, they do not wish to be delayed on starting on site whilst the Section 278 process is underway. The timing of delivery of the various highway mitigation schemes are in any way controlled through other conditions. All of these conditions are for delivery at either the occupation of the 100th dwelling or the 300th, with the exception of the Toucan crossing on Eastborough Way, which is condition 13 and is prior to first occupation. It is not considered that by approving this latest application that it would lead to a delay of delivery of the highway mitigation schemes, because the triggers on these are via other conditions. It will be up to the developer to ensure that they submit the details in a timely fashion in order to allow the mitigation to be delivered at the required time. In addition, Warwickshire County Council Highways have no objection to the proposed variation. It is therefore considered that the proposed variation of Condition 10 is acceptable. Condition 26 of the previous consent states that no phases of development shall commence until details of sustainable welcome packs have been approved and are to be issued to the houses prior to their occupation. These packs include the provision of public transport information. This current application proposes to amend that condition to be submitted and approved prior to occupation. The applicant's reasoning is that a welcomes pack do not need to be issued to the new owners until occupation, so this is considered also a reasonable trigger to ensure the details are submitted and approved prior to occupation. It would also mean that the packs contained the most recent up-to-date information available at the time. It is considered that this proposed variation would not delay the provision of the packs. Indeed, since the outline, the Council has assessed the wording on this standard condition, and subsequently this condition is now written as per the amended requested. Again, it's up to the developer to ensure they submit the details in a timely manner in order to meet these targets. It is therefore considered that the proposed variation of Condition 26 is acceptable. Condition 24 is in terms of fire safety. The condition wording originally was that no phase of development would commence until a scheme for the provision of adequate water supplies and fire hydrants necessary for firefighting had been submitted to and approved in writing by the Council, and that the phase would not be occupied until provision has been made in accordance with the approved details. This current application seeks to amend that condition to be submitted and approved and implemented prior to occupation. The applicant justifies the change, saying that as the firefighting scheme is required to be fitted prior to occupation, that this should be the trigger. Warwickshire Fire and Rescue have been consulted and have no objections subject to all the hydrants at the approved locations being installed and commissioned prior to the occupation of the properties. It is considered that this proposed variation is acceptable and would not delay the provision of the water supplies and fire hydrants. In conclusion, the issues to consider for the amendments of these conditions are for highway and fire safety, and neither of the statutory consultees involved on these have any objection to these amendments. Furthermore, officers consider the amended triggers will not affect the mechanism for delivery of these conditions. The recommendation is therefore of approval, subject to the conditions as printed on the agenda. These conditions include the requested amendments as well as the previous approved amendments to the original outline conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jackie. I believe we have one speaker on this item from the public, and that's Yolanda Bowater. Yeah, so have you been briefed that you've got 3 minutes in which to make your presentation? Okay, if you just hit the big sort of button on your console, that'll turn you on.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you, Chair. My name is Yolanda Bowater and I am the Planning Manager at Crest Nicholson. This application seeks to change the trigger points at which the details for each of the 3 conditions are approved. At present, the details all need to be approved prior to us making a start on site. The requested change is for the details to be submitted and approved prior to any occupations. Condition 10 concerns the approval of the 4 off-site highway improvement schemes for this site. These schemes need to be implemented at different times in the construction of the development, and this is controlled by other conditions which are not being changed. It routinely takes many months for detailed junction designs to be finalised through Section 278 agreements, so we are asking if this condition can be worded to say that all detailed drawings can be approved before the occupation triggers. This means that we will not be then held up or delayed from making a start on site to deliver these houses for the borough. Condition 24 concerns water supplies and fire hydrants. All necessary engineering works will be undertaken in liaison with the Water Authority, so we are asking for these details to be approved prior to any occupations. Condition 26 concerns the approval of the Sustainable Welcome Packs. Asking for these details to be approved prior to any occupations means that the information can be more up to date and relevant, ready for the new occupiers, rather than preparing it now in advance of making a start on site. This change would also align with the Council's standard wording for this condition. There are no objections from the Highway Authority or from the Fire Service. I would ask that planning permission be granted to change the trigger points for the approval of the details associated with these conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. So the recommendation that stands before us then is for delegated authority to be granted, subject to conditions for the printed. Do I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Smith. And do I have somebody to second that? Okay, I will say, Councillor Markham, thank you. Okay, so that means we can now move to debate phase. So are there anyone who wishes to speak on this before we move to the vote? Councillor Kandaka.
So, Chair, I did actually want to ask the Speaker just one question about the details of Sustainable Welcome Packs.
Okay, please do.
In the past, some of them have been very flimsy and just contain links to websites. So if you could explain what you're proposing to be in the packs, that might be useful for us to judge them.
Thank you, Chair. At the moment, I can't tell you because we haven't set out to design the packs, but what we are doing is working closely with the planning officer for this site on the reserved matters, which is Mrs. Claire Hill, and we'll be liaising with her in terms of what's appropriate and necessary, and with the County Council in terms of what they consider necessary. Different authorities require different levels of information. Some of them require train timetables, bus timetables, maps and plans of all of the local cycleways, as well as obviously links to websites and wherever information can be found. So whatever is appropriate, we will work together with somebody to put that information pack together.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or speakers at all? No? Okay, in that case, can we move to the vote? So all those in favour then of the recommendation, can I have a show of hands, please? Okay, all those against recommendation? Okay, that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Is your hand up, Councillor Malcolm? Thank you. 5. Okay, any abstentions? No. Yeah, it's okay. So we now need to decide on an alternative to that. So obviously, Ash, any thoughts on this?
Thank you, Chair. As committee members will be aware, normally through the discussion and debate, you would identify the sort of issues you have with the recommendation. From what I've heard, there hasn't been any concerns raised from members regarding the recommendation, so perhaps you want to discuss the potential alternatives. There isn't anything I can put forward at this stage to guide you on this one, unfortunately, Chair.
Okay, any recommendations at all or thoughts? Councillor Kondaka.
Thank you, Chair. Can I suggest actually we approve it subject to a condition that a welcome pack comes to this committee for approval? Because I say that's my big concern was low quality packs. I think it's very hard for us to reject the application because, yeah, they're doing all the right things. It's just the quality of it and the timing. So can I actually move that we amend condition 26 to include the referring the welcome packs to a committee or some this committee if it's been done later. So it's quite a good way of checking the quality, but I don't think we can turn it down. I think we just need the certainty that the welcome packs include those things like the maps, etc. So can I move we actually approve verification subject to some check on the quality of the welcome packs? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that in terms of the welcome packs? Thank you. Councillor Rudkin. Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone that would like to speak on that at all?
I'll just come in, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. It's Ashley then. So did you indicate to speak, Councillor Wilson?
Thanks, Chair. So obviously we're not discharging the condition at this committee. So a member can call in a condition discharge when it comes forward. So normally, you know, if members wanted to have a condition that's being discharged, they would call it in. I don't have an issue with that being added as a recommendation if you say wish, Chair. But that would be the normal process, i.e. Councillor Condacor would be notified of the fact that we've got this condition being discharged. He would request it to then come to committee. That would be the normal process. I do note, Chair, that the applicant does wish to speak if it's not normal practice, but if you want to bring her in on this.
Yeah, I'm happy to bring her in on this.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say that I'd be completely happy with that. That's absolutely fine.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I have to admit to being in two minds about this application. It is actually within my ward, so I can see both sides of the argument on this one. On the basis that we would actually get to see more information about the actual welcome pack, and we will ensure that particularly the highway upgrades are still maintained, but they have more scope to actually get those in place as well as being able to meet their business needs. I would be content with the proposal put forward by Councillor Condacor. I was hoping there would be more debate on this actually, because I genuinely hadn't made up my mind at the stage. And as a ward councillor, I think it's important to keep my mind open on these issues. So I was hoping that the debate might sway me one way or the other, but we haven't actually had that debate. But what I am absolutely resolute on is that we must not lose those highways improvements, which I actually spent quite a bit of time working with Councillor Clark on, particularly along Eastborough Way, which is a very, very congested road at the best of times, and the impact it has particularly on Highfield Road and Lutterworth Road at that junction, because that can be a particularly bad snarl up because of the amount of heavy goods vehicles that actually flow through that particular arterial route, going from the A5 through to the M6 and vice versa. And we all know the impact of what happens if the M6 goes down, that they divert everything through Nuneaton up to the A5. And we also have an industrial estate there, which is in my patch as well. It's called Attleborough Industrial Estate. It's actually in Whitestone. So that also generates a number of HGV movements within the patch. So on the basis that those will be maintained and we'll get to see more information on the welcome packs, I cannot see a substantive reason for refusal outright. But this is a rare occasion where I actually tend to sit on the fence with a planning application because I generally hadn't made a decision on it, and I was hoping that people might sway me, but that hasn't happened on this occasion. So an interesting experience. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Anybody else like to speak on this matter? I have to say I do find myself agreeing with you, Councillor Wilson. I was waiting to be persuaded because I sort of sat very much on the fence on this one as well. But if we're happy with the recommendations that have been put in then by Councillor Condacourt in terms of a welcome pack and sort of in terms of the developer working alongside us to sort of get that put out to standards that we're happy with. Are people happy to vote on that? Yeah, I'm seeing some nods of appliance. So, okay, then if we move that then as acceptance, all those in favour? Okay, that's unanimous then. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Okay, thank you. That brings us to agenda item number 3 this evening. Over to you again, Jackie, when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Please ignore where I've got on the presentation slide item 4. Wishful thinking, it's item 3, so apologies. The application is for the demolition of the existing public house and buildings and erection of one retail unit, which is now Class Use E. The application is for an amended scheme as to what was previously approved by appeal under the reference 034430. The Cross Keys Inn is on the corner of Gudges End Lane and Bowling Green Lane in Bedworth, and which is largely two-storey public house with ancillary buildings. The existing public house has a date brick of 1898 and is set back off the road and looking onto the crossroads. Car parking is to the front with a beer garden to the rear with a 1.5 metre palisade fence fronting onto Bowling Green Lane. There are, as I say, other ancillary buildings on the site. The application is for an L-shaped, new purpose-built single-storey building to provide one retail unit, finished in facing brick and small hipped roof finished with slates with a flat roof above. The proposal would provide 343 square metres, of which sales would be 233. The application is to include a customer car park for 20 parking spaces, an external Amazon locker and cycle storage. The previous application, which was allowed at appeal, is still extant until the 21st of June this year and is a fallback position if this current application is refused. In addition, the agent has advised that the applicant took vacant possession on the 10th of June and the demolition will be carried out in the near future under the previous approval. The main difference between the previous proposal and the current application is that the area having the existing beer garden and children's play area has been removed from the application due to a restrictive covenant on this area. The location, layout and size of the building has been amended to allow this. The number of parking spaces have been reduced by 2 and the delivery area is now within the car park. The main entrance gable has been replaced with a composite canopy and the mechanical plant area has been moved and 4 new proposed electric vehicle charging points are proposed. The building has been brought closer to the side with 5 Gudges End Lane. Members refused the previous application on the following 5 grounds: not within a new or existing district or local centre and not demonstrated that the proposal would not have a detrimental impact on 2 nearby local centres, on Dart Lane and on Smorrel Lane. Not demonstrated suitable marketing of the existing pub in order to retain the building and its existing community use to the detriment of the amenities of the local area. Number 3, not demonstrated that the impact on the highway safety of the area would not be severe, nor that the traffic generated would be suitable for the site. resulting in a significant detrimental impact on highway safety in the area. 4. The proposed development would result in a total loss of a non-designated heritage asset and the area's distinct historic character. And finally, 5. Would not be in keeping with the design and character of the surrounding area and incur the loss of an impressive and imposing building by the replacement of a modern unit out of character, incongruous and over-prominent in the street scene, with a prominent location to the detriment of visual amenity. The planning inspector considered these reasons for refusal and allowed the appeal, and stated that reasons 1 to 4 were considered unreasonable and costs in the region of £14,000 were awarded against the council on this basis. Notwithstanding the level of objection, this application is being reported to committee at the request of Councillor Kyle Evans. There have been 7 objections from 7 addresses and 27 petitions of 300 signatories. Ash Green Residents Association and the Bedworth Society have also objected, along with Councillor Singh. The details of the no objections can be seen on page 41 through to page 43 of your agenda. The issues in relation to this application are set out before you. There you go. And on the slide, and these will be dealt with in turn. The first issue is the principle of development and whether the sequential test which has been applied is adequate, and secondly, the effect of the proposal on the vitality and viability of nearby local centres. The principle for the demolition, new building and use has been established by the allowed appeal and is still extant, as I say, until June 2021, and are material considerations and provide a fallback. National policy states that the new application has to be assessed in accordance with up-to-date policy, which in this case is the Borough Plan 2019 and national policy, and should provide high-quality development with environmental mitigation. Policies state sustainable development should be approved unless material considerations state otherwise. This proposal is considered to be in a sustainable location and an appropriate location for retail and within the settlement boundary. The site is also relatively close to the north-eastern point of Strategic Employment Site EMP7, Bowling Green Lane, which will provide 26 hectares of employment land. The proposal would provide 13 full-time jobs and 12 part-time jobs. The location is not in a current district or local centre, and retail use is classified as a main town centre use. The MPPF and local policy states that a sequential test should be applied to all main town centre uses not in an existing centre. No such sequential test was received for this current application, but one was submitted previously which assessed the impact to the nearest local centre at Smurrell Lane. This report concluded that it would not impact on this. The inspector in the previous appeal stated that, consequently, it has not been demonstrated that the proposal would materially harm the vitality and viability of nearby local centres. There is no reason to believe that there have been any material changes since the previous application, and that there are no specific policies in the borough plan that explicitly forbid out-of-town retail uses. Some of the objections received are on the grounds that it will provide competition on existing local stores. However, competition cannot be considered as a planning reason for refusal. Indeed, the inspector specifically referred to this and stated, "There was local concern raised in relation to the potential effect of the proposed convenience store on the local shops in the area by way of increased competition, and that this could force existing businesses that serve the local community to close. However, competition and choices are not planning matters. I therefore, this is the inspector, cannot afford them any weight in my decision. It is considered that the site is in a sustainable location, also that the sequential test provided on the previous application is still relevant to evidence there is no detrimental impact to the vitality of other businesses, and that national policy nor new policies introduced to prevent this proposal, and therefore the principle of development on this proposal is considered acceptable, providing other material considerations are satisfactory. The second issue is the loss of a community facility and whether the public house as a community facility has been adequately marketed, and the loss of the public house as a potential heritage asset. The Bedworth Society have objected to the loss of a heritage asset, and the reasoning they have given is because a previous landlord of the public house was involved in saving hundreds of lives during a coal pit disaster in 1915. However, this reason, or indeed the building's age, is not reason enough to justify the building as a non-designated heritage asset alone. The NPPF states the significance of the loss of a heritage asset must be considered. Local policy states information has to be provided to assess the loss of such building. No further information has been provided to what was sent on the previous application. Historic England have no objection, and the Victorian Society and Warwickshire County Council Museum and Archaeology have not responded. The building has some architectural features, and the oldest parts appears to date back from the 1890s, but from a lay perspective it's a relatively functional building and is neither statutory listed nor previously locally listed or designated as a heritage asset, and neither is it within a conservation area. The council are currently reviewing the local listing, but as yet there is no evidence to argue that it should be considered as a new non-designated heritage asset, and therefore refusal on this basis would be difficult to defend at appeal. The loss of a non-designated heritage asset was members' fourth reason for the previous refusal. The inspector in the last decision stated, "There is no substantive evidence that demonstrates that the building's heritage significance has been subject to an objective criteria-based assessment. Furthermore, whilst the building was built in 1898 and its design and external appearance reflect the late Victorian period, it does not have any features that merit significant architectural or historic value." The inspector then further says, "Therefore, based on the evidence before me and what I have heard at the hearing, I do not consider that it has been adequately demonstrated that the building should be classed as a non-designated heritage asset." In relation to costs, the inspector considered that the council's refusal on this basis was unreasonable. Nothing has changed since the time to consider that this would not be viewed similarly if this new application was refused and appealed on this basis. Neighbour objections refer to the loss of a community use in an area where many local pubs have closed, but the property has not been brought forward by the public as an asset of community value. Members' second reason for refusal last time was that the application had not adequately demonstrated that suitable marketing had been carried out in order to try to retain the building and its existing community use. Borough Plan Policy HS4, in reference to retaining community facilities, states there should be adequate alternative facilities and services available, or it can be demonstrated that there is no longer a demand for the use, or the use is no longer viable or appropriate. The council's policy team originally objected as the policy requirement states that it has to be proven that there was a greater benefit to the local area from a retail use than a public house. The additional information received reiterated that it was not registered as an asset of community value and that it would be replaced by a convenience store, in itself constituting a community facility. The agent provided details of other pubs in the area. The policy team subsequently removed their objection. The previously approved application had supporting information which made clear that the existing public house was not commercially viable and that it had been proactively marketed. This evidence was tested at appeal and considered acceptable. The current pandemic has further exacerbated the viability of the pub and the business remains commercially unviable. In terms of viability and marketing, no extra information has been provided this time, but information for this was received on the previous application. The inspector previously stated in that decision that, although the statement of common ground confirms that the Cross Keys is not an asset of community value, it is clear based on evidence before me and the representations that I heard at the hearing that it's a facility that is used by the local community. It was argued by the council that the public house had not been adequately marketed in order to try and retain its use. The inspector then went on to say, however, based on the evidence before me and what I heard at the hearing, it was clear that the public house had been the subject of industry standard marketing. He follows these comments by stating, as such, I conclude that it's been demonstrated that adequate marketing of the property has taken place. Moreover, whilst it's regrettable that the proposal could result in the loss of a community facility, based on the evidence before him, it is highly unlikely that the use of the property as a public house could be sustained in the medium to long term. The extra supporting document received this time states that COVID has exacerbated the viability of the pub. Whilst the pandemic has illustrated the need for local shops and emphasises the community benefits of having retail facilities in comparison to an underutilised public house. In conclusion, it's considered there is insufficient evidence to consider the public house as a non-designated heritage asset, and therefore it would be unreasonable to refuse the application on these grounds. Furthermore, it's considered that the details provided in terms of the public house viability and adequate marketing submitted previously was adequate to satisfy the inspector, and that there was no reasoning to consider that time or new policies would change the inspector's views since the appeal. The third issue to consider is the impact on residential amenity and sufficient separation gap and disturbance to neighbours. The proposed site plan is shown in colour on your slide. The smaller black and white drawing shows the location of the neighbouring properties, there and there. And it's a shadow footprint that would be seen in June at midday on that black and white slide there. Policy DS3 of the Borough Plan provides guidance to protect residential amenity of adjacent properties. In relation to the impact to 1 Bowling Green Lane to the south, that one there, the proposal is over 13 metres from the boundary, and the impact of this proposal has lessened as the proposed service yard has been removed, so deliveries will be further from this property. In relation to the impact to number 5 Goodges End Lane, the existing public house is along the majority of the side boundary of this property's garden, with a minimum distance to the boundary of 4 to 5 metres for single storey and between 4.5 to 9 metres from the boundary for the 2-storey elements. The nearest part of the neighbouring house is extension, so cannot be protected. The proposed plant area, originally to the side of this adjacent property, is now on the opposite side of the retail unit, so is an improvement. In terms of impact to windows, the front windows will not be impacted, and the original rear windows on a 60-degree line will be 12 metres away. It is therefore considered that it will not provide an undue sense of enclosure, especially as the proposal is only single storey. In relation to the impact to this neighbour's rear garden, the new building will run along the majority of this neighbour's garden and will be closer than the building previously approved. The previous proposed building was to be set 7.8 metres away from the rear original corner of this neighbour's building, and this has reduced to 6 metres. The previous approval showed the new building to be set off the boundary of this neighbour's property by 3 to 4 metres, and which is now reduced to 2.5 metres. However, the nearest amenity space would be considered to be outside of the original rear of the house, which is almost 7 metres away. We'd be looking at that part as being the nearest private amenity space. In addition, the proposed eaves height is approximately 3.75 metres, and the roof slopes away from the boundary to a maximum of around 5.5 metres from the ground level. There is no doubt that there will be an impact to this neighbour's garden, but the impact is considered acceptable. In relation to the coming and goings, the site already has commercial activity to neighbouring properties. The application form states that the unit would be open for business from 7 AM until 7 PM Sunday to Mondays, and it's considered that the noise from a supermarket would tend to be spread throughout the day rather than being just afternoons and evenings like a public house, so would be a betterment in terms of noise after 10 PM. The proposed hours of operation are the same as that approved for other co-ops in the borough with similar proximity to residential properties. Plant noise can be governed by condition, and the council's environmental health team have no objections subject to conditions. In terms of deliveries, it's recognised that there will be different delivery vehicles visiting the site. Newspapers and sandwiches would be delivered by a light goods vehicle, so provide limited impact. The main delivery issues would be from the HGVs. A noise report was submitted, and the council's environmental health officers had no objection subject to conditions which have been agreed with the agent. In conclusion, it's considered that residential amenity is acceptable. The fourth consideration is visual amenity. Policy DS3 of the Borough Plan is to maintain a high standard of design. The proposal is single-storey and is of reasonably contemporary design with a hipped roof with hidden flat roof to lessen the overall height, and materials to match the locality. The entrance is proposed to have a canopy. The elevations are to be broken up by brick piers. Members' fifth reason for refusal last time was that the development would not be in keeping with the design and character of the surrounding area. The design is very similar to that previously approved. The inspector stated in his previous allowed decision that I accept that the appeal site occupies a prominent position and would be materially different in form. However, the appeal site is located, this is still his words, however, the appeal site is located in a predominantly suburban area that exhibits a variety of built form. As such, in this site-specific context, the proposed contemporary single-storey building with a hip roof and materials consistent with the area would not appear jarring or incongruous in the street scene. He finalises this by saying, having reached the above conclusion, he states the proposed development would not result in material harm to the character and appearance of the area. No costs were given for this reason for refusal, as the inspector considered that this was a subjective reason for refusal. In conclusion, it's considered that the proposal will not be detrimental to the visual amenity of the area. The fifth consideration is the impact on highway safety and car parking. Borough Plan policies HS1, HS2 and DS3 refer to traffic implications of proposals and requires a modal shift of 15% from car use. The 3 proposed electric vehicle charging points is therefore a welcome addition to this application, as well as the provision for cycle parking. A further road safety audit was requested on this application and assessed by Warwickshire Council Highways, who have no objection subject to conditions, one of which is to ensure HGV deliveries do not coincide with school drop-off times due to the proximity of the school. The surrounding road is largely yellow-lined and close to a double roundabout and has parking of school traffic in the area, so adequate on-site provision of parking is considered essential. The proposal shows 20 parking spaces, but Highways have requested the removal of one of the spaces due to highway visibility. The emerging SPD for parking standards states that food stores should provide one space per 25 square metres, which based on the retail floor area of 233 square metres would be just over 9 spaces. In addition, the servicing management plan provided by the application and could be conditioned states that parking will be restricted to an hour time limit. Warwickshire County Council Highways had no objection to the number of parking spaces, but have requested £5,000 this time towards the traffic regulations order to extend the double yellow lines along Bowling Green Lane, and also requests a barrier to ensure vehicles and pedestrians could only enter and leave at certain points. Since the previous application, the planning class uses have changed so that the retail is now Class E use, which means whilst unlikely in this case, there could be permitted development to change to some other uses which could impact on parking. Warwickshire County Council Highways objected on these grounds, but the objection was removed when the applicant agreed to a condition to restrict the use to just retail. Despite a no objection from Warwickshire Highways, last time members refused the application on highway safety grounds. The inspector in his decision in relation for the reason for refusal stated, "I accept the use of the site as a convenience store would be likely to increase in traffic generated from the site when compared to the existing public house." He then goes on to say, however, there was no substantive or technical evidence presented by the council or any interested parties that demonstrated that such an increase would result in material harm to vehicular and pedestrian traffic. Costs were made against the council on these refusal grounds. The sixth consideration is landscaping and ecology. A planting plan has been received suggesting that the existing pine tree at the corner of the site, just there, is removed and replaced. The tree is not a significant specimen and appears somewhat stunted, and the council's tree officer has suggested a pine tree is not the most suitable species for the site as this type of tree due to its being surrounded by hard landscaping. As there are trees surrounding the site, the council's tree officer has requested conditions to protect these trees during construction. A protected species survey has been provided and has confirmed that the buildings have limited value to bats. However, a condition is considered appropriate to ensure any bats or nesting birds are not disturbed. In regards to the existing beer garden, this has now been removed from the application and no longer shown as part of the site. The agent has advised that this area is to be retained and fenced off and will be maintained by the occupant. It is considered that to ensure this in perpetuity that this is conditioned. In conclusion, it is considered that the previous allowed appeal and the inspector's reasoning at the time, as well as the fact that the site still has an extant consent for a larger scheme, are both material considerations that weigh heavily in favour of approving the application. It is therefore considered that the principle of development, impact on visual amenity, character, appearance, consideration as a non-designated heritage asset are all acceptable and comply with the new borough plan and amended MPPF. It's a shame to lose a community facility, but its loss is in compliance with policy. Whilst moving the building closer to 5 Goodyears End Lane than the previous approval, the impact is still considered acceptable. It's also considered that noise and highway safety can be made acceptable via conditions. To grant planning permission, therefore the recommendation, Chair, is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed and a legal agreement in relation to highway roadworks. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Jackie. We've got 2 people who would like to speak on this item. Both are objecting, so I'll take them in the order that they appear on my sheet. The first one is Councillor Singh.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Although I run a local business, I know my objections don't carry much weight in planning terms. But I myself, as the local elected councillor for Heath Ward, would like to say that the local community were not consulted in any way regarding this. The local people are appalled that this building, which is of historical importance and has stood for over 220 years, can be destroyed overnight. No one asked for this grocery store, nor is there any need, as there are ample grocery stores in this area. I would like to point out that as from the previous application, there was an exit route out from the car park into Goodyear's End Lane, whereas in this application, there is only one exit and entry, which is from Bowling Green Lane, which makes it very dangerous as for the amount of traffic it will generate. As for parking, they don't add up, as how many is allocated for staff and what is left for the public. Parking figures are flawed, so if you take 4 electric charging points, 6 for staff and 2 for disabled, that only leaves about 11 spaces, which leaves only 10 spaces, which is not enough for a store of this size. And the location of the car charging point showing car space as 1 to 4 cannot be classed as parking, as when not in use, these cannot be used by any person as to shop in the store, and the location is in a way of a delivery vehicles and will not be viable. I would ask the committee to take into account that as the building is classed as an asset of the community and need to be preserved. I would like to ask the committee to defer any decision until a site visit is made, and I would like to ask the committee to demand answers from Highways Department as how they came to their decision not to object to this application. And please note there are many errors in the applicant testimony in page 49 of the agenda. Stating points of pubs nearby as Old Black Bank, Alties, 2 of the 4 stated to be 20 minutes walk are now permanently closed. The school have shown serious concern regarding this application and vigorously object to this, and also the school governors are objecting strongly to this application as it's on a very dangerous location. One cannot compare a pub customer's base to a supermarket, as the vehicle movement of a supermarket can be calculated as per minute in and out. And also like to say that the yellow lines concerning will affect the properties on Bowling Green Lane, which they do not have any they haven't got any parking spaces. They haven't got any driveways. They've got no garages at the back. So all they rely on the parking on front of the. Where will they go from that if a yellow line is extended further?
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Councillor Singh? Councillor Kandaka.
Sorry, can you just clarify the point on asset of community value? When was it registered and by whom?
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Kandaka? Okay, I did have one thing I just wanted to clarify with officers. Those do the parking spaces that Councillor Singh sort of talked about, and he said that by the time you've taken out things like staff space, etc., there was only, I think, was it 9 spaces that you said?
There's probably only 9 spaces.
Okay.
After use all the staff. I'm only talking less. There could be even more. They're talking about 13, 14
Yeah.
members to run the store.
Okay.
We're only talking about 6 spaces, but there could be even
Can't
more
find.
stuff.
My question was, can you just confirm the number that was given? I think it was 9 was the minimum fat size of shop.
Yeah, the new emerging SPD parking for that area of shop would be 9 spaces, but that doesn't state that that is just for customers. That could be for anyone.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions at all for Councillor Singh? No? Okay, in that case, can I ask Warwickshire County Councillor Gilbert to make his statement, please?
Thank you, Chair. May I start by congratulating you on your appointment to this committee as Chair? Congratulations. There's a lot of professionals in this room, planning officers, planning developers, whatever they are, property developers, and I suppose I'm here as a human element. I'm the County Councillor for the area. I know the area. I speak with residents on a regular basis. I have nothing against this kind of development. I have nothing against this development, other than the fact it's in completely the wrong place. This is a busy junction with already huge pressures on it. A school nearby, a school that has throw-in times and throw-out times, a busy period of the day, morning and afternoon, does not need any more pressure adding to it. You're in a fix as a committee. You're in a really difficult position. Money has been spent on this appeal. You know, we've lost as a council, you've lost as a council, but we are here to represent the ratepayers. And it's clear to me the ratepayers are against this. The store will need servicing much more than ever a public house would need. Take that from me, I know that's a fact. I've bought stuff in supermarkets that goes out of date whilst you're walking it round in the trolley. So if you're on the motorway, got to get a delivery there full of milk and cream or whatever it is, and you've missed your slot, you're not going to turn back, you're going to deliver it. So this window of opportunity for delivery is just completely and utterly enforceable. It will not happen. There is that doomsday scenario of it being dropped off when the children are entering school or the children are leaving school. My concern is not about the loss of community asset. I'm sure anybody, as a publican, I know myself, pubs are difficult things to operate. I have no issue with this having competition to the area. Competition is good, that's what it's there for. What I have against this is it's not fit for purpose. It's not in the right spot. As a councillor, my phone rings to discuss traffic issues. And I'm sure we've all had that moment when we hear of an incident in our patch where a child has been run over or a pedestrian. It's not a very nice moment. This is one of those situations, the doomsday scenarios waiting to happen. The road isn't fit for purpose now, so extra provision is not going to make it any better. This is not right for the area. May I also talk about parking, because I don't really want to get into the technical side too much, because, as you know, I'm not a professional in any way, shape or form. But this seems to me to be worse than the previous one. And also, when the delivery wagon's in there, as long as these electrical charging points aren't sort of some virtue signalling, if they are actually there for the purpose, you can't park in those if you have a normal vehicle. But when the lorry's in, they're blocked off. So where are they going to go and charge? The nearest one is Tesco's. So I would suggest that this, on that grounds, will cause a problem because it cuts off parking spots. I'd also like to know where the staff are going to park, because a shop like that will need more than 2, and they aren't going to walk on the whole. And as I've tried myself many times to get staff not to drive to work, they will do, and they'll park in those spots. So nothing against it, it's just in the wrong place.
Okay, thank you very much, County Councillor Gilbert, for your representation. We have in front of us then a recommendation, which I will now ask, is there anyone who is happy to propose? Yeah, so it says the planning recommendation is to recommend to grant planning permission subject to the conditions printed and a section 106 legal agreement in relation to highways roadworks. Okay, thank you. Councillor Rudkin then has proposed. I'm happy to second that in order to move to the debate. So would anybody like to speak on the recommendation or on the matter? Councillor Hammersley.
Yes, it does say that it's not really of historical value, but to the locals, the whole building is of local historic value, and it's a landmark in the area to all these people. for all the reasons it's been there forever, for those that have lived, those people that have lived there. And then it says, the principle is acceptable, but, well, to the locals, it's not really acceptable because they're not really accepting it. And introducing HGVs to this already congested area at certain times is a recipe for disaster for health and safety. Lorries and HGVs and children just really don't mix. And with the parking, it says 13 full-time, 12 part-time, and we've just done the number crunch. It doesn't really add up. You know, there's not enough parking for customers. Lots of children are dropped off by parents in cars. At the moment, it's the pub car park is used as a drop-off point. Well, that's because the pub is closed. But with this store being open, again, I don't think they would take too kindly to parents dropping kids off and may put an end to it, which then would only increase the problem in the area around the school, which is a narrow street going into almost a single lane in Bowling Green Lane, not really suitable for drop-off and pick-up points for children. I'm surprised there's not been an accident there prior to now with children. Just children and vehicles, they really don't mix, and if you throw some HGVs in there as well, that I beg to differ that that's the right decision for the reason of putting that shop there. It just does not add up to me. So I really can't go with the plan to putting that shop there for those reasons.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Housley. Councillor Wilson, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chair. This is a really difficult application because I actually sympathise with many of the arguments which have been put forward. But the problem that we have as a committee is that all of these arguments have been tested already by the inspector. If we were to re-uphold all the arguments which have been raised by residents, all in good faith, the inspector is extremely unlikely to go against the previous ruling. That is prior experience in these issues, and then we would have to pay £14,000 or probably more for the privilege of being told you've been told this before anyway. So the principle of being a development on there has already been established. The principle of the highway safety, even though I'd take on board all the arguments which have been raised by the speakers and members of the committee, those have been tried and tested by the inspector. He has said that he doesn't agree with those, and more to the point, the Highways Department has not backed that up either. And in fact, reading the report, we were actually severely criticised by the inspector for putting in a recommendation for refusal on highways grounds when we didn't have the highways technical evidence to support that. He said we had no basis to do so, and we did so in the face of professional advice. And I can only think of one instance which has been reported back to committee where highways have had it wrong and the committee has had it right. And I've sat on this committee on and off for 11 years now. And as much as I would love to refuse it on that basis, again, I can't. And again, the historical aspect, I love my history. But if we have not listed it locally and it hasn't been registered for whatever reason as an asset of community value, and I take at face value what Councillor Singh has said there have been issues, but I have to take the application as it stands before me. And there is no registered asset of community value, so that is not a material consideration. With regards to parents parking on that area to pick up children, great, but they've done so as a privilege. It's not a right, They did not have the right to actually go on to that piece of land and pick up and drop off their children. They've done it at the goodwill and good grace of whoever the landlord at the time has been. They have no right to do that. That is not its designated purpose. So as much as we would all love to have a designated car park at every single school throughout the borough for people to pick up and drop off, because it's an issue no matter which area of the borough we live in, pick up and drop off time for schools, pick up and drop off points are not built into schools. That's a national planning issue, not one that we can resolve. So as much as I would love to vote against this, because I sympathise with a lot of the arguments, the inspector, the previous inspector, has got us all ends up. If we hadn't got a previous inspector's report, I might have been willing to chance it. But what is the point in trying to chance it again when we already know the answer? And then cost us £14,000, £15,000, £16,000, which we know we have black holes left to us in the budget by the previous administration, and that money could be better spent towards delivering services. So I cannot, as much as I don't like it, I will have to vote for it, but effectively with a peg over my nose, because I don't really want to, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Smith, you were next.
Yeah, I won't repeat everything that Councillor Wilson has just said, because that was the majority of what I was going to say. It saddens me to see this. I sat on the original committee when we refused it, and I totally agree with the feelings the residents have. But the fact is, without a highways objection and without that protection of a community asset, there is nothing we can do. The Cross Keys, sadly, was lost when the inspector overturned on appeal. That permission is still extant. If they want to go in there and bulldoze it tomorrow, they can do that. So this isn't about saving the Cross Keys anymore. This is about us doing our duty as a committee and doing the right thing. It's a really bitter pill for me to have to vote for this. But for me, the decision is this application before us slightly better than the one that we refused before and was allowed on appeal? And I'm sad to say it probably is marginally better. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to support the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Chair. I sympathise with the residents over this, but unfortunately with the inspector's decision, that building is going to come down whatever. So we're left with an empty plot. I don't think this is the ideal scenario. I think I've got some concerns over the car park and then the design of the building, but not enough, unfortunately, for me to go against the officer's recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Walsh.
Yes, my concern is regarding the traffic and the highways agency, because they haven't really looked at the conditions at the top of Smorrell Lane and Heath Road. There is obviously the one-stop shopping area there, and if you look at the traffic situation, and they have an in and out entrance and exit, literally right by traffic lights, and the amount of issues there are considerable. So considering they've looking at a one in and out section, right by a school, right by a junction, I can't see how they can consider that to be an option that's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Condacott, I think you wish to speak as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, lots of things have already been said, particularly about the fact this has already got permission to be demolished. But I do think we should look at some of the conditions and trying to get the best out of this we can. One thing I'm interested in is condition 18. Maybe the officers can explain the long-term maintenance plans for the former beer garden. Will the actual community be able to use that, or is it, I don't know what the covenant says, but will it actually be effectively a bit of park, or are we actually losing that to an area that's being sort of just maintained? And also very particularly litter bins and those sort of issues, because the co-op round where on my ward, major litter problems. It's going to be a massive problem at this crossroads. So we need to get litter bins at all the right exit points and make sure they're cleared, because it's actually the litter that really blights the community from these sort of developments if the developer isn't actually spot on in terms of catching the litter in bins and hopefully doing community litter picks. Because I say the litter is a big blight. And the final point I'd say is things like cycle storage. It just says cycles with no sort of idea of if there's going to be racks. But I think the cycle parking areas are always important at these places. And quite often supermarkets use them to sell flowers and things after a while. So I do think we need the Sheffield stands, and actually in the conditioning, I think it's probably already covered by conditions, but when we agree the details, if the officers can make sure we have decent signs up to, I think we're going to have a new cycling standard. It's going through the consultation process at the moment, but I think if we can make sure we apply those standards to this application, because it is going to be a major important place to cycle to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can we just confirm about the cycling stands, please?
We could. I don't see any reason why we couldn't condition for the actual details of the cycle details. That would be no problem whatsoever.
Sorry, yes, and the access to the pub garden, yeah, was the other thing that we need to look into.
There's no indication that it will be open to the public. We couldn't make them open to the public. Obviously, at the moment it's open to the public when they're attending the public house, but there's no details or that's likely to happen on this particular application. The reason why I requested a management plan on there was I was concerned that it would be a piece of land left over and become overgrown, which is why I added that condition there.
Yeah, okay. We'll allow a last couple of comments then from Councillor Hammersley and then Councillor Condacor.
Just consideration from if this should go ahead because of highways or nobody else can see a reason why it shouldn't, as the developer, once this building is knocked down, it's gone forever. Has the developer maybe thought of keeping a structure of the building or the main frontage of the building just in case the developer or the person that goes in there should at some stage move away, so at least some original part of the features of the building could be kept just in case it could revert back to what it is now.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure that's actually possible because it's a facade is of a two-storey building versus a new one-storey one, isn't it? So I'm not sure how that would work in its entirety. I don't know if you've any sort of seen anything like that happen previously or not. No. Okay, sorry, and then was it Councillor Condacor and then Councillor Rudkin?
Yeah, just on that last point about the pub garden, I think it does need to make sure it doesn't become a litter trap. So if the management plan includes litter as well as obviously mowing and things, because litter just accumulates anywhere you've got a little place that the public can't access but can chuck rubbish. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Rudkin.
Thank you, Chair. I remember this coming to planning committee back in 2018. I think it was the first planning committee I ever sat on. I didn't like it then, and I don't like it now. But the 5 reasons that we give for refusal were unreasonable, as been stated. And with no objections from highways, I don't think we've got a choice. I do believe I know the area very well. My little boy goes to school around there. I have the same concerns and issues that have been raised many times. I've experienced them, but I just don't feel we as a committee we have any other option but to support the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Rudkin. I don't see any other hands up indicating a wish to speak. So, I mean, I can only echo what I've already heard tonight. I really wanted to turn this down, and I was looking desperately for, a planning argument, and I struggled to find one. So I do sympathise immensely with residents and the historic loss, but there's nothing there that gives us any sort of real protections over that building. So with a very heavy heart, I just have to do right by this committee and right by this council. I will sadly have to sort of vote in favour of a recommendation in front of me. So with that in mind, if there's no other speakers, can we move to the vote then? So all those in favour of the recommendation, can I have a show of hands, please? Okay, all those against? Okay, no abstentions, so that's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us on then to our final agenda item of the evening, item number 4. So, Jackie, whenever you're ready, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The application is for the erection of a detached outbuilding for an additional consultation room, dental surgery, Class E use at Whitestone Dental Practice at 41 Lutterworth Road, Nuneaton, within the existing car park, which is accessed off Cavalier Close. The site is on the corner of Lutterworth Road and Cavalier Close. The materials proposed have been altered to now reflect a temporary nature in the form of timber frame and timber cladding. It was previously proposed in brickwork. The applicant states the building is necessary to provide additional space due to COVID. The applicant states the additional structure, surgery room, is for those with limited mobility that require a larger space socially with the current social distancing, and is not for additional patients, but for a safer service. They also advise that a large amount of money has been invested in the car park to allow for more parking. The main building is a large 2-storey structure of red brick with previously approved extensions. The existing building has some architectural features. To the rear is a bungalow of 9 Cavalier Close. This neighbouring property has a single side-facing window towards the proposal site, which is obscure glazed so cannot be protected. To the north of the proposal lies number 1, the Nook. The rear garden is 40 metres away from the rear wall to the rear boundary. That's 9 Cavalier Close, and that's 1 the Nook there. This application is being reported to committee at the request of Councillor Andy Sargent. There have been 3 objections received from 3 addresses. The comments are proceed on page 76 of your agenda. The key issues are shown on the slide. In terms of the principle of the proposed development, the existing use of the site is established as that of a dental practice. The proposal would see the practice expanded through the addition of the proposed outbuilding, which seeks to provide an additional consultation room, including waiting room and toilets. This dental practice is located within a residential context, serving a local need. Town and Country Planning Act requires that planning applications are determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Borough Plan Policy DS3 states that new development within the settlement boundaries will be acceptable subject to there being a positive impact on amenity on the surrounding environment and local infrastructure. The proposed development is within the settlement boundary and, in principle, is deemed acceptable, providing that matters on privacy, amenity and highway safety are found to be satisfactory. The second issue to consider is the impact on residential amenity. To the rear of the application site lies number 9 Cavalier Close. This property is a bungalow. There is 1 side-facing window towards the application site, which is obscure glaze, so cannot be protected. There is a 1.8 metre high boundary fence, which partially screens the site from the property. To the northwest, the residential neighbour of 1 the Nook, with their rear wall faces towards the application site. The rear gardens of One the Nook is about 14 metres, and as there are no rear windows on the proposed consultation room, this distance is over the minimum distance required under the Council's distance standards within the SBD. It's considered that the consultation room will not have a detrimental impact on residential amenity. The Council's environmental health team were consulted on the application. They did raise some concerns of the overuse of the site due to the volume of people who attend the site for treatment. However, they considered that the proposed outbuilding would not exacerbate noise issues, therefore they had no objection to the proposal. The third consideration is impact on visual amenity. The NPPF and local policy requires that development is sympathetic to the area and of high standard. The existing dwellings in the location have a combination of red brick and render external finishes. The proposal would appear to be of a temporary nature with a design that would not be of significantly out of character to the detriment of the surrounding area and street scene. The proposal for the siting of a temporary structure within the confines of the existing car parking area to the rear would generally be out of view of the main public domain. It's therefore considered that the proposal would not lead to any significant harm to the visual amenity of this site, street scene or surrounding area. The fourth consideration is impact on highway safety. Warwickshire County Highways have assessed the proposed scheme and raised doubt to the proposed temporary nature of the proposal and have acknowledged that it is for people with limited mobility. However, they state as the proposal would result in the loss of existing parking spaces, those with limited mobility may not be able to park near to the site, within the site, or be picked up safely due to the reduction in parking provision. No other mitigation has been submitted, and despite the applicant stating it will not increase the number of patients, it would increase the number of treatment rooms, and it's considered it would be difficult to condition the number of patients to a practice. As the proposal would remove some of the existing parking spaces, it would in effect reduce for all, including those with mobility issues, and would increase competition for parking spaces within the dedicated parking area. This could force patients to seek alternative parking provision. The previous approval for the site indicates that there are currently 3 consultation rooms. The emerging car parking SBD states that 3 parking spaces should be provided per consultation room. Whilst the proposal has not provided a parking plan, it's considered that the site is unlikely to be able to provide 12 spaces, which would be required for 4 consulting rooms. However, this SBD currently has limited weight, as is not yet been adopted and is currently being only consulted upon. The area already has limited on-street parking within Cavalier Close and has double yellow lines and traffic road orders in place in the corner of Lutterworth Road. Increased parking in the area could therefore be detrimental to the safe, free flow of traffic movement on the highway. Warwickshire Highways object to the application, stating that it's contrary to the NPPF for safe and suitable access for all users, and because the NPPF states that development should be refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would be severe. Similarly, the NPPF states that proposals need to provide safe and secure areas and minimise conflict between pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles. It's considered that the loss of parking on the site would be against these policies of the NPPF. The NPPF promotes a sustainable presumption in favour of sustainable development, in line with local policy, and should be approved as long as no material consideration to indicate otherwise. It's considered that there would be no significant detrimental loss of residential amenity or visual amenity. However, it is considered that the proposal would reduce the opportunity for people with mobility impairment to access the site due to the loss of existing car parking spaces within the already small parking area, and increase parking in an area that already has limited on-street parking and could be detrimental to the safe, free flow of traffic movement on the highway. The recommendation is therefore of refusal for the reasons as mentioned in your agenda, and the extra policy added to the addendum. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So in front of us then we've got a recommendation to refuse planning permission for reasons as printed. Do I have somebody to propose that? So Councillor Wilson, thank you, and seconder Councillor Smith, thank you. Are there any councillors who would like to speak, or any members, sorry, who'd like to speak on this matter? Councillor Condacore.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit surprised they haven't, given that we want to refuse this, actually tried to negotiate some mitigation. Was any mitigation suggested, like cycle routes or cycle storage or disabled parking bays? Or it just seems we really do need dentists, and it does seem that some compromise could have been gone to. So could the officers explain if there's been any attempt to mitigate it in any way?
Yeah, we did actually send the highways comments to the applicant, to the agent, and they responded with a rebuttal, but there was no mitigation measures provided, not even a parking plan, which would have been useful to have seen what's existing and what's proposed.
Councillor Hammersley.
Well, for all the highway reasons, they refused that one, but I'll just refer back to what we've just, they didn't refuse. Sorry, I know we've moved on from the Cross Keys, but the highways are saying that's not safe. But I know we can't comment on the past.
Yeah, I think we can't sort of compare apples and oranges here. They're two different cases, and we have to judge them on their own individual merits. Councillor Hammersley, sorry.
I can understand their reasons for refusal of that.
Okay, any other speakers? I know this sort of dental surgery myself, having sort of driven past it many times over the years, and it is sort of in use quite heavily 7 days a week, which is a concern. And it's always, whenever I've been past it, it's always been at capacity. And I do sort of worry in terms of the parking issues that it's going to cause by adding it. As much as I think, yes, we do need to have more dentists in the borough, Councillor Kandaka, I find myself on this one actually agreeing with the highways in terms of what they're saying. Okay, if we have no other speakers then, can we move to the vote? So the recommendation is to refuse planning permission. All those in favour of refusing planning permission? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Okay, and with no other items of business on the agenda, I'd like to thank all members for their time this evening and all officers for their time, and we now bring this meeting to a close. Thank you.